The flashing blue and red of the police lights bled through my curtains, painting the walls of my living room in chaos. I stood barefoot on the cold hardwood floor, clutching the crumpled note they had left behind. My hands shook, not from fear, but from disbelief. Outside, my neighbors gathered, whispering, their faces lit with the glow of phone screens as if watching a late-night show. And in the middle of it all, standing smug and satisfied, was my brother. His arms were crossed, chin lifted, like he had already claimed victory. "They won't believe you," he murmured earlier, his smirk carved deep into my memory. "The house is gone. You're finished." The siren died down, leaving only the hollow silence of humiliation. My heart pounded in my ears. They thought I was broken, stripped of everything I had sacrificed for. But as I looked at that note, ink rushed and uneven, I felt something stir, a slow, burning calm. They thought this would destroy me. The truth was, they had no idea what was coming. I wasn't born into wealth, power, or privilege. What I had was discipline. I earned every dollar through sweat that stained my shirts, through hours that stretched longer than the sun itself. While others gambled with their paychecks or drank their nights away, I saved. Not for vacations or shiny toys, but for security, for a roof, a home, something permanent. That home was everything. The wooden porch creaked in familiar rhythm under my boots every evening. The smell of pine and fresh paint lingered from the last repair job I had done myself. In the mornings, golden light slanted through the living room windows, catching the dust in quiet halos. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, or so I thought. My family never saw it that way. My brother Daniel was the loud one, the charming one. He knew how to twist words until they became weapons, and how to smile just enough to make neighbors forget his debts. My sister Clara was quieter, but no less dangerous. She had mastered the art of silence, the kind that allowed schemes to bloom unnoticed until it was too late. And then there was me, the steady one. The one who worked double shifts, who paid off medical bills, who handled emergencies without fanfare. Responsibility was both my crown and my curse. It started with whispers at family dinners. Daniel bragged about his contributions to the house. Clara rolled her eyes, muttering that I was too possessive about a pile of wood and brick. I brushed it off. Families fight, I told myself. Families test each other. But then came the first sting. One Sunday afternoon, while neighbors gathered for a cookout, Daniel raised his beer and announced loudly, "Let's be real. The only reason we have this house is because I negotiated with the bank." Laughter bubbled among the crowd. Some clapped. I stood there, spatula in hand, the smoke of the grill curling into my face like mockery. I wanted to correct him, to shout the truth, that I had stayed up night after night reading every clause in the mortgage, bargaining with lenders, covering debts when no one else would. But instead, I stayed silent, because in that moment, my pride wasn't worth the scene. Later, as I scrubbed grease off the grill alone, I caught Daniel's smirk in the reflection of the sliding glass door. He wanted me humiliated, and I let him. That was my mistake. Over time, their pattern became clearer. When bills arrived, they suddenly forgot their share. When repairs needed money, I owed it to the family. Every sacrifice I made, every hour I worked, became invisible. But when they wanted to impress guests, the house was suddenly theirs to flaunt. Still, I held on, because the deed was in my name, signed and sealed. That thin stack of papers, tucked inside a fireproof box under my bed, was my silent anchor, my proof, my protection. But anchors can rust. One evening, while sorting through the bills, I noticed a corner of the box slightly misaligned. My chest tightened as I opened it. The deed was there, but so were fingerprints that weren't mine. A chill crawled up my spine. They had been inside. They knew. I told myself it was paranoia, that maybe I had touched it absent-mindedly. But deep down, I knew better. The symbolic weight of that deed grew heavier with every passing day. It wasn't just paper. It was the line between security and ruin, between sacrifice honored and betrayal waiting to strike. And strike they did. The first sting at the cookout was just a rehearsal. The real performance was coming, and when it did, the audience wouldn't just be neighbors. It would be everyone. I should have seen it then, the way shadows lengthened in that house even on the brightest days. I should have known humiliation was only the beginning. The weeks after that cookout felt different. Subtle, but sharp. Daniel's laughter carried a new edge. Mocking, practiced, rehearsed. Clara's silence grew heavier, her eyes darting away when I asked simple questions. The air in the house thickened, as if even the walls were holding secrets. Bills kept piling up. Utilities, taxes, mortgage insurance. I covered them, as always. But this time, I noticed something strange. Clara's closet was filling with new dresses. Daniel drove home in a second-hand truck, newer and shinier than anything he could realistically afford. I didn't ask. Maybe because I already knew. Then the harassment began. Daniel started calling me landlord in front of guests, his grin wide and cruel. "Careful," he'd say, "or the landlord will raise the rent." Laughter followed. My cheeks burned, but I bit my tongue. Each jab landed like a spark against dry wood. At night, when the house was quiet, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, its blades slicing shadows across the room. My chest felt heavy, as though someone had piled stones on me. My body ached from work, but sleep refused to come. One evening, I overheard Clara on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was hushed but urgent. "Yes, the papers are almost ready. Don't worry, he'll never see it coming." I froze in the hallway, my skin prickled, ears ringing. Papers? Which papers? I stepped back before she noticed, retreating into the darkness of my room. My pulse thundered as the realization sank in. They weren't just mocking me anymore. They were planning something bigger. Soon the rumors started. Neighbors I'd known for years gave me odd looks. One finally slipped, saying Daniel had told them I was behind on the mortgage, that foreclosure was imminent. "Shame," the neighbor said, shaking his head. "You've worked so hard." Foreclosure. Lies spreading faster than I could catch them. The isolation grew. Friends hesitated to visit. Some family members stopped answering my calls. At Sunday dinner, my chair felt smaller, my voice drowned out by Daniel's booming stories and Clara's carefully timed sighs. My health started to fray. Headaches clawed at me. My hands trembled when I tried to sign checks. My stomach churned whenever I heard the creak of footsteps outside my door. I felt like a prisoner in the very house I had saved. But then, a spark. It was late one night when I stopped at the small corner store after work. The cashier, Mr. Patel, an older man with kind eyes, noticed the exhaustion written all over me. "You don't look well, my friend," he said, sliding my receipt across the counter. "Everything all right at home?" Something in his tone, genuine, not prying, broke the dam. I didn't spill the full story, but I muttered, "Family trouble. They're trying to take everything I've worked for." Mr. Patel's brow furrowed. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You know, sometimes it's not about being the strongest. It's about being the smartest. Keep your papers safe, keep records, and never let them see you break." His words lingered long after I walked out into the cool night. For the first time in months, I didn't feel completely alone. Someone saw me. Someone believed me. I went home, locked my door, and pulled out the deed again. My hands still shook, but this time I took action. I photographed every page, made copies, and hid them in places they would never think to look. The fireproof box wasn't enough anymore. As I slid the final copy into my worn leather jacket, a strange calm washed over me. The storm hadn't passed, but I finally had an umbrella. And as I stared at my reflection in the dark window, I whispered to myself, that was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. The warning signs came slowly, then all at once. One crisp morning, I woke to a sharp knock at the door. The kind of knock that doesn't wait politely but demands attention. When I opened it, 2 men in uniform stood there, clipboards in hand. "Are you the homeowner?" one asked. His tone was flat, official. My stomach dropped. "Yes," I said carefully. He handed me an envelope. "Notice of sale," he explained. "Property to be transferred pending verification." The words blurred on the page as I read them. Sale? Transfer? My house? My home? The ground felt unsteady beneath me. I barely heard them leave, their boots crunching against the gravel. My pulse pounded louder than their footsteps. Inside, Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded, sipping coffee as if he'd been waiting for this moment. "Guess it's official," he said smugly. "House isn't really yours anymore." Clara didn't even look up from her phone. "We did what was best for the family." I wanted to scream, to slam my fist into the table and demand answers. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, slow and steady, because panic was what they wanted. That night, I laid out the documents they'd given me. The sale notice was riddled with errors, wrong signatures, dates that didn't align, even a misspelling of my name. My hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from anger. They hadn't been clever. They had been sloppy. I dug out my deed, my copies, my records. Piece by piece, a picture emerged. Forged papers, false claims, fraud dressed up as legitimacy, but I wasn't powerless. The next day, I went to the county office, heart hammering in my chest. The clerk raised an eyebrow as I explained, then nodded slowly. "If what you're saying is true, you'll want to speak with legal counsel. This isn't just shady, it's criminal. Criminal." The word echoed like thunder in my head. Daniel and Clara thought they had me cornered. They thought that by using official letters, legal jargon, and intimidation, they could push me out. But they underestimated me. I wasn't just a laborer or a quiet sibling anymore. I was the one with the truth, and now I had allies, clerks, lawyers, and even strangers who could see through their lies. Still, the pressure mounted. Daniel spread rumors that I was mentally unstable. Clara whispered to relatives that I was hoarding the property out of spite. The smear campaign grew, staining my reputation until even longtime friends began to doubt me. I felt the weight of their attacks like a chain around my chest. Nights grew colder, lonelier. Some evenings I'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at the flickering bulb overhead, the silence pressing against me like a vice. But then, I remembered Mr. Patel's advice. Keep your records. Don't let them see you break. So I gathered every scrap of evidence, bank receipts, payment records, mortgage documents, notarized signatures. I organized them in neat binders, labeling each section with care. The more I stacked, the lighter I felt. My proof was ironclad. When I finally confronted Daniel one evening, the look on his face was priceless. "You think you've won?" I said quietly, placing the thick binder on the table between us. His smirk faltered. "These aren't your lies," I continued. "These are the facts. And facts don't crumble under pressure." For the first time, Daniel didn't have a comeback. His jaw tightened, his fingers drummed nervously against the counter. But then, instead of backing down, he leaned in closer, eyes narrowing. "You think this ends with papers?" he hissed. "You don't get it, do you? We'll fight you until you've got nothing left. Money, time, sanity. It doesn't matter. We'll bleed you dry." He stormed out, Clara trailing behind him. The silence left in their wake was heavier than ever. But as I stared at the binder in front of me, I felt something new. Resolve. They thought they still had control. They didn't. The war didn't explode all at once. It spread like fire in dry grass. Silent, then sudden, then everywhere. Within days, the rumors grew teeth. Daniel told anyone who'd listen that I had defaulted on payments, that the sheriff would be coming any day now to evict me. Clara whispered to relatives that I was hoarding family property, trying to keep them homeless out of greed. Lies twisted into stories, stories hardened into truth. At the corner store, I felt eyes linger on me too long. At church, whispers fell silent when I walked past. Invitations stopped coming. I was the villain in their story now, and yet I didn't break. Because while they spun tales, I was building something solid. Every night after work, I sat at my desk, the glow of the lamp turning the room into a war bunker. Piles of receipts, notarized deeds, mortgage statements, even text messages, they all became part of my arsenal. I documented everything, every word, every bill, every payment. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. The deed, the symbol of everything I had worked for, sat framed now on my desk, no longer hidden away. A reminder, not of what they could take, but of what I had built. Daniel noticed. One evening, he barged into my room without knocking, eyes darting straight to the frame. "You think a piece of paper makes you untouchable?" He sneered. I didn't answer. I simply met his gaze, calm, unblinking. His smirk faltered, just slightly, enough for me to see the crack. But cracks don't stop a storm. They let it pour in. Soon, Daniel escalated. He filed false complaints with the HOA, claiming I neglected the property. Anonymous calls came into my workplace, questioning my financial integrity. Even the mailbox filled with unsigned letters. "You'll lose everything. Give up now." The pressure was suffocating. My chest tightened with every new blow. But therapy sessions, something I never thought I'd need, became my lifeline. A counselor reminded me, "Their power is built on your silence. Break it, and you break them." So I shifted. No more passive endurance. I became deliberate. I hired an attorney, not flashy, just thorough. A woman with sharp eyes who listened more than she spoke. When I laid out my binder of evidence, she raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You've done half my job already," she said. "This case isn't theirs to win. It's yours to expose." For the first time, hope didn't feel like a fantasy. It felt like strategy. Daniel and Clara, meanwhile, were unraveling. Daniel drank more, his voice louder, angrier at family gatherings. Clara's silence turned brittle. She avoided my eyes, fingers tapping nervously on her phone. Their empire of lies was cracking under the weight of its own fraud. Neighbors who once whispered began to question. "If the house isn't yours, why does he have the receipts?" someone asked Daniel. His answer was fumbling, forced. The tide was turning, slowly but surely. One night, as I filed the last piece of evidence into a folder, I felt it. A shift, like the quiet moment before thunder splits the sky. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. The confrontation wasn't planned. It was inevitable. The day arrived like a storm cloud, heavy and unignorable. A neighborhood meeting had been called under the guise of resolving property disputes. But I knew better. Daniel wanted a stage. Clara wanted an audience. And I was about to give them both, just not the performance they expected. The community hall was packed. Folding chairs scraped against the tile floor. Voices buzzed low, eager for spectacle. At the front, Daniel stood tall, Clara seated beside him, her face carefully blank. "Thank you all for coming," Daniel began, voice booming. "It's time the truth came out. My brother here," he gestured toward me, pausing for dramatic effect, "has been lying. The house he claims is his, stolen, manipulated. He's been hoarding it while the rest of us suffer." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel's smirk widened. He thought he had won already. I rose slowly, binder in hand. My heart pounded, but my voice, when it came, was calm, steady. "Is that so?" I asked softly. The room fell quiet. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum lower. I walked to the front, each step deliberate. I set the binder on the table and flipped it open. Here are the mortgage receipts. Every payment, signed, stamped, verified. Here is the deed, notarized in my name. Here are the bank transfers covering bills, funds from my account, not theirs. I slid the pages across the table, the sound of paper against wood sharp as a blade. Every claim they've made, I continued, is a lie. And here is the proof. Murmurs erupted, louder this time. Neighbors leaned forward, scanning the documents. My attorney, seated near the back, gave me the slightest nod. Daniel's face drained of color. His smirk faltered, replaced by a twitch at the corner of his jaw. Clara shifted in her chair, eyes darting to the floor. I locked eyes with Daniel. You told everyone I was unstable. You told them foreclosure was coming. You forged documents to steal what I built, but lies don't stand when the truth walks in the room. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, the kind of silence that suffocates liars. A neighbor finally spoke. He's right. The paperwork is solid. Another chimed in. Then what about the notice of sale? I held it up, the fake document trembling in my hand. Not from fear, but from fury. Forged. Dates don't match. Signatures don't align. It's a crime. And I've already filed it with the county clerk. Gasps turned to outrage, but not at me. At them. Daniel's hands clenched into fists on the table. His voice cracked as he tried to recover. This doesn't prove anything. He's manipulating all of you. But no one was listening anymore. His empire of words had collapsed under the weight of evidence. I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a calm, cutting edge. I don't want apologies. I want change. The room held its breath. Daniel slumped back into his chair, sweat beading on his forehead. Clara's mask of silence shattered, her eyes glassy, lips pressed tight, as if holding back the collapse of everything she had built with him. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet one. I wasn't the shadow, the silent worker, the invisible sibling. I was the truth, and truth had just burned their kingdom to ash. After the meeting, the world shifted. Not immediately, not like the snap of fingers, but steadily, like a heavy curtain finally being pulled back to let the light in. Daniel and Clara left the hall in silence, their heads lowered, their once confident strides reduced to stumbling. The neighbors who used to whisper behind my back didn't follow them this time. Instead, they stayed with me, asking questions, offering quiet nods of respect. Word spread quickly. The forged documents were investigated, and the county office confirmed what I had already proven: fraud, deception, deliberate manipulation. The so-called sale was invalid, void before it ever began. Daniel's voice, once booming in every room, grew smaller with each passing day. His charm no longer worked when people knew what lay beneath it. Clara, who had built her power in silence, found that her silence now made her invisible. They weren't just stripped of the house they tried to steal. They were stripped of their masks. For me, the days grew calmer. Not easier. There were still scars, still paperwork, still nights when my chest tightened remembering how close I had come to losing everything. But calmer. I took the deed, no longer hidden in a box, and framed it on the wall of my living room. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Proof of survival, of resilience, of truth that couldn't be erased. The glass caught the sunlight each morning, scattering gold across the room like a blessing. Slowly, I rebuilt. I fixed the squeaky porch boards that had groaned under so many arguments. I repainted the walls, covering the fingerprints of chaos with fresh coats of peace. Each repair felt symbolic, as if I was patching my own wounds alongside the house's. The neighbors began stopping by again. Some apologized for believing the lies. Others simply brought food, a gesture of solidarity. Even Mr. Patel from the corner store visited, handing me a jar of honey. Sweetness, he said with a smile. After bitterness. I wasn't naive. I knew Daniel and Clara would lick their wounds, perhaps plot again in smaller ways. But they would never hold the same power. Not over me, not over the truth, because I had changed. Responsibility was still my crown, but no longer my curse. I learned to set boundaries, to guard not just my home, but my peace. I built new relationships, friends who saw me not as a burdened caretaker, but as someone worth standing beside. And every night, as I locked the door, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not just because I had kept the house, but because I had kept myself. The story began with humiliation, neighbors laughing, my brother smirking, my silence weighing heavy. But it ended differently. Now, when I walked through my neighborhood, I did so with my head high. People nodded, smiled, stopped to chat. Not out of pity, but out of respect. Daniel's empire had crumbled, Clara's schemes dissolved, but I stood, stronger, steadier, unbroken. And as I looked at the framed deed one final time that evening, I whispered to myself, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. So, that was my story. A home nearly stolen, a family's betrayal cutting deeper than any stranger's knife, and the fight to reclaim not just walls and bricks, but my worth. Now I want to ask you, have you ever faced favoritism, betrayal, or someone abusing their power against you? How did you rise above it? Or how are you still fighting? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it today. Because here's the truth I've learned. Worth isn't something they hand to you, or something they can steal from you. Worth is something you claim for yourself. And once you do, no one can take it away.